And I heard another voice from heaven, saying, Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached into heaven, and Elohim hath remembered her plagues.
Thank you, everybody, for coming on to the call, Exiting Babylon and Correcting Your Status. This is a group that gathers once a week to share experiences, and I like to bring on people that have been doing different things to correct their status and exit Babylon. And thanks to Colorado Prepper and Marshall Schubert, who moderates the calls, we're able to do these calls on a regular basis. Today is July the 10th, 2017, and we have Jackie Fig, who has been at this for a long time and has learned so many things, and she is creating new things and working together with lots of people. And that's a lot of what we're doing, is getting people to be a little more cohesive, because we have so many different brilliant, wonderful people that have done so much. It's always a delight to have someone like Jackie Fig come on and share the things that she is doing and give us some pointers on what we can do to get our status corrected and exit out of Babylon. And so with that, I'd like to open the floor for Jackie Fig. And
hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi everyone. Yes.
Hi.
So I had some problems getting on there, but yes, we've been doing. There's been a lot going on since I was last on your show, and I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. We have a website that we've been working on. It's down right now, but it will be up again soon. It's called internallydisplacedpeople.org. And that on that website, the idea is that it will have everything that you need. Now, this will be based in California, but it doesn't matter. We're talking about a federal layer. It will apply across the board. It will just need a little tweaking for the other states. But basically, the important thing to find would be your state evidence of residency. Usually there's a list of contracts that go with that particular list, and we'll be providing ways of canceling those contracts and getting out or exiting Babylon. Let's stick with the title of the show. It will be a way of exiting Babylon. In California, there's a few of them that will be difficult, such as having children in school. That's a tough one, but I think most people would agree it's time for us to get out of that school system. It's really not a good place to have your kids educated. So another one would be employment. I know a lot of people have problems with employment. We do create other numbers for people to use. Employers are sometimes difficult. It's a little easier here in California because a lot of employers have been sued. Social Security numbers are listed as optional in some areas, in some areas of employment. Certainly in the fast food industry, they're listed as optional. So obviously, if you work for somebody, you shouldn't give out those numbers. But anyway, so we've been having a lot of fun, and I if it's okay with you, I would like to read a couple of things that are kind of eye-opening in regards to this layer, or the Babylon layer that really exists. So if you look at Oregon, the Oregon Revised Statutes, there is a section that's referred to as this state, procedure in criminal matters generally and jurisdiction. ORS 131.205, definition for ORS 131.205 to 131.235. And then it says, as used in ORS 131.205 to 131.235, unmuted? Oh. This state means, where did it just go? The land and the air and water space above the land and water with respect to the state of Oregon has legislative jurisdiction. So right there you can see the mental construct that occurs with us ceding jurisdiction to them. And the way that we're ceding jurisdiction to them is through a multiple number of contracts, such as, residency, anything that ties you to a residence, basically, voter registration, driver's licenses, car registration, registration of a business, business licenses, attending college, attending schools, all those things where you're required to fill out a form that says, under penalties of perjury, you are a resident of this state. And so just to emphasize, if those contracts don't exist, then it's merely a rebuttable presumption. But if those evidence of contracts do exist, then you would need to meet that evidence with at least evidence of the same level. In other words, if it's prima facie, you would need to rise to that level of prima facie or conclusive evidence. So it makes our task a lot harder if you have any of those contracts. So anyway, it's kind of exciting when you look at all the other states and you really start to see this federal layer kind of come in. It's got not very much to do with the federal enclave area as was previously kind of thought. You think of these lands that have been ceded to the United States, but there's this invisible layer, or it's anywhere. It could be in Japan, it could be in any country. It's this layer that floats across, and it's any time you've ceded jurisdiction to them by entering into these contracts. So anyway, it's kind of an exciting layer that we hope to help people exit out of.
Nice.
We also found some cases. Actually, I have a bunch of case law. I haven't been through all of it yet. But in that case law, it really reemphasizes that. We have a judge that makes determinations, that certain persons, as it were, are liable in this state and others are not. And it kind of makes it clear how this layer comes in. So certainly, these cases are going to make a lot of difference. It's a lot of work. I've got 82 of them to look through. I've been through a couple, and it's kind of exciting. So I don't know if you have any questions.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. Anybody out there have questions for Jackie?
Do you want me to open it up for questions and answers? Because I kind of put it into lecture mode.
Sure. I think that's good. What do you think, Jackie?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's something that we can. I don't like it being tethered. Sorry, I'm tethered with my phone cord. I'm used to walking around when I talk.
All right. Well, the queue is currently empty, just so you know.
Well, I can continue, and if there's a question, here's a really important kind of thing to understand when you're looking at this. The state of California, for instance, any of the states, they're not just states, they're e-states. They're a state. And we are in the House of California, let's call it, if you want to look at it from that perspective. It's a box, if you like, that is called in this state. When you have these contracts, it's you then entering into a father-son type of relationship. And as many of us know, you can't argue with the father when you're the son and be in his house. You have to exit the house to have a good argument where you're not going to lose just by the fact that if you want to do that, you have to get out. So you have to come out of that house to really have the right to argue. So that's a really good picture to kind of, a really good concept to have in your mind, that there's this master-servant relationship. We are the servants. The state is the master. While these contracts exist, it's only while these contracts exist. And there really isn't much that you can rebut. You can write all the declarations you kind of want to write, but unless you have evidence that would match, like, for instance, the driver's license itself, having possession of that is evidence of residency. So unless you can create evidence to the contrary, and, that's not as simple as writing a declaration, because the thing is, a day after your declaration, you could have done something different and changed. See, a contract can always be updated. So as long as you're carrying that you're in possession of that document, that would be a problem for you. You would be in the House of California, so to speak. So it's kind of important that we start to sever those ties and come out of that house and start creating some new things.
Jackie, you have two people in the queue that have questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Marshall Schubert, if you can, announce which caller is in the queue first, maybe.
Hello. Nice to have you on our call. I would like to know, you were talking about the Oregon revised statutes. Could you please run through at least one or two of them again? I didn't get them.
Sure. This is one in particular. So this is the Oregon revised statute. Let me just pull up the exact wording here.
Yes.
Okay. So it comes up under their criminal matters generally and jurisdiction. That's the section that it's in, and it's referring to the term this state. It's Oregon Revised Statutes 131.205, and it's a definition. So let me read the definition, because it gives you a real visual of what's kind of going on when they're defining this state. So this state means the land and the air and water space above the land and water. Now, as most of us know, there is no land above the land as such. It's a mental construct. It's something that's going on, in the mind. So that's kind of how it's written. So, then it says, with respect to which the state of Oregon has legislative jurisdiction. Many of us kind of understand, like the 14th Amendment. We have a lot of issues with the 14th Amendment for a start. If we look at that first with a little more of the understanding of the term in this state, then the writing in the 14th Amendment makes a little bit more sense. So in other words, when we cede jurisdiction to the United States through our state by getting these contracts, which if we look back at like California under 17459 and 17460, it's very clear. That says the acceptance by a resident of this state of a certificate of ownership or a certificate of registration of any motor vehicle or any renewal thereof issued under the provisions of this code shall constitute the consent by the person that service of summons may be made upon him within or without this state, whether or not he is then a resident of this state, in any action brought in the courts of this state upon a cause of action arising in this state out of his ownership or operation of the vehicle. And it says the same thing for a driver's license. Now, when we look back at the 14th Amendment, the way that it's phrased, it says all persons. That's always bugged me. When you look at the Constitution and the way that it's constructed, the term person is definitely the officer. And as we understand from our vehicle code, one of the person that it actually relates to is the officer. So this would kind of make sense. There's actually two parts to this. The officer and the person in commerce, the person who cedes jurisdiction. Those become persons under the code. So now things start to make a little bit more sense, because then it says all persons born or naturalized in the United States, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, but then it also says are citizens of the United States and citizens of the state where they reside. So we're specifically looking at residents. And by ceding jurisdiction from within your state, and remembering that the states created the United States, then in a sense, that's one of the things that is binding you as a citizen of the United States. If you have these contracts within your state, you're considered a resident of the state, which is a citizen of that state and a citizen of the United States. So anyway, it's kind of, Oregon kind of makes it a lot clearer than many of the other states. They merely say things like, in this state, let me see if I can pull one up very quickly. It will say, let's have a look here. Of course, I don't have one. In this state means within the exterior limits of the state of California and includes all territory within these limits owned by or ceded to the United States of America. So the interesting thing about the word territory, we all understand what land means, and there is land that is ceded to the United States. That's part of the federal enclave as such. But there is also territory that is being ceded to the United States every day that we register something within their system. Ceding, and, well, the type of territory that we are actually ceding to them is legal rights. We're giving them legal rights to our stuff. And it kind of makes a lot more sense when you start to look at that. And it doesn't seem so daunting on how we come out. By seeing, that kind of issue, I think it makes it pretty clear that we need to exit Babylon. We need to exit those contracts. And we've had some success. So I have Ken right next to me. He may or may not say something, but he will definitely jump in if I say something that's wrong. Yes, Ken? I'm like on a mobile phone, and I'm kind of like tethered. But anyway, he's operated, one of the how long ago did you get rid of all your contracts? Come closer.
2004, 2005.
You got out of you did some processes to get out of the system. Okay, so I've been stopped with Ken. He's not the best of drivers or travelers. I got slapped. So anyway, he usually what happens is the officer will try and, get an address, and Ken simply says to him, well, I know you're trying to tie me to a residence and we're not going there. Ken wasn't really sure up until now why he said that, but that was just what he says. And the officer kind of, raise their eyes, and they disappear and come back, and they usually say something to the effect of, we could take you in, we could tow your car, but we can't be bothered. And then they, hand everything back and have a nice day and we leave. And it's that simple. So I've seen this in action. And Ken is the one that has the order of cancellation. He show that to the cop, too. Yeah, he does usually show that to the officer as well when he gets stopped. So it's kind of a nice document to have, and it stops the presumption that you forgot to renew it. And it's very helpful to have. So I know there was a second person with a question.
Somebody out there have a question here for Jackie? Doing great, Jackie.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, my name's Howard English. I'm from South Carolina, and I was wondering on your website that you're correcting. Will this information be available as far as the procedure, the order of cancellation, how to exit these contracts?
Yes, I want to go a little further with that. Let me give you a little short list of the contracts, for example, just so that you see how in-depth this is and how much they kind of have a tie on us. So in California, you can find the term resident. It's found at California Vehicle Code 516. It means any person who manifests an intent to live or be located in this state on more than a temporary or transient basis, presence in this state for 6 months or more in any 12-month period gives rise to a rebuttable presumption of residency. That's the first part of it. So it's very clear. Let's say I was an alien and I landed here from Mars and someone says, hey, you got to have a driver's license. So I'll go off to the DMV, and I really don't have very much. I happen to bring my birth certificate with me, which is probably all I'll need. And on the whole, especially in California, you really don't need much.
Really?
Yeah, all I need to say is, yes, I'm a resident. And so, my word is the very first thing that puts me into that. And that's merely a rebuttable presumption at that time. But once I have possession of that driver's license, now the driver's license becomes evidence. So the following are evidence of residency for the purpose of vehicle registration. So obviously vehicle registration is also another evidence of residency. South Dakota doesn't have that. Some states you don't have to be a resident to have registration, so let me add that. I have not found one yet where you can have a driver's license and not be considered a resident. If anybody else out there knows of one, this would be really good information to have. Okay, these are the other ones. Your address where registered to vote, location of employment or place of business, payment of resident tuition at a public institution of higher education. And as you can see, that one is payment of resident tuition. So if you chose to be a non-resident and pay the extra fee, then you won't fall into that category. Attendance of dependents at a primary or secondary school. So that's a tough one for some people. They have children at school. Technically, those would have to be removed. They really tie in the residents through schools. It's really a huge problem that we have. Filing a homeowner's property tax exemption. So again, if you obtained that benefit, you're coming under the House of California or whatever state you're in. Renting or leasing a home for use as a resident. That one is probably claimed on some tax benefit. Declaration of residency to obtain a license or any other privilege or benefit not ordinarily extended to a non-resident. H, possession of a California driver's license. And then I is other acts, occurrences, or events that indicate a presence in the state is more than temporary or transient. So even those would be you filing some piece of, some form where you're swearing under the penalties of perjury that you are a resident. On that subject, one of my cars, I have a car. It was in my estate. I put it into my estate, and I used a bond on it. So we wrote a bond. It's a subrogation bond, a master bond, and a financial responsibility letter that you carry with it. We did that, and the DMV, they have this cheeky little thing that they do where they try and say that they didn't get that information in time, that they had to suspend your registration. It's going to cost you $14 to reinstate it. And I really don't like injustices, so I was seething over the $14. Ken's laughing because he knows I was really pissed. I'm not paying that $14. Yeah, he was laughing at the time. So anyway, I was seething. So sure enough, here I am at soccer with my kid, and I see a cop, and now I'm seeing a little flag on my windshield, $90 ticket for the suspension on my registration show. If you think I wasn't happy with the 14, I was really pissed with the 90. So, I slammed it on my desk, and I was seething for about 2 weeks. And then I thought to myself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do an A for V. I did an A for V. I stuck my estate number on the ticket, and I sent it in the little yellow flag that they left in, the little envelope that they left it with. And 5 days later, Ken and I were traveling down the street. I was in control of or semi-control. And I seen this cop car behind me, and they pulled up next to me, and I have kind of tinted windows. And then they decided to follow me, and sure enough, they stopped me. And there was 2 of them in there. There was a supervisor and a rookie. The rookie went to Ken's side to talk to him, and you could tell the rookie was funny because he felt really pissed off that he was, not allowed to do his job. He's supposed to be in training, so he's like strutting and trying to make himself look good. And the supervisor is laughing. He's like, your car is in England. How did you get your car in England? So I had to think for a moment, and so I'm like, it's in a foreign trust. Actually, it's in an estate that's in my foreign trust. So he's like, I want to know how you did that. That's so awesome. And, you know, the rookie is like trying to tell Ken, roll down your windows. He's trying to give him orders. It's hilarious. He was like, wanted his ID and everything. So anyway, the cop then, the supervisor then asked me, would you happen to have a driver's license with you? And I think he was just wondering what English people look like or something. I mean, it was really funny the way they kind of looked at me, then pulled me over, then wants to see my license. You know, he wanted to see what these things look like. And I go, oh, no, I don't have it with me. And he goes, oh, it doesn't matter. It's in England. It's in England. He was just totally overwhelmed. So here's what we kind of uncovered. They were scanning cars. And as they're scanning cars, the license plate from mine, at that point, it had a California license plate. As I say, I had actually registered it into my estate. So as he was scanning license plates, he saw that plate. And, you know, just before he left, he wasn't worried about anything. He thought it was great. He was kind of implying he would like to do that, you know. It was pretty funny call, funny stop. Anyway, he said to me, you know, though, your windows are kind of heavily tinted. So, of course, I had to push it and say, well, I don't think you have jurisdiction, do you? And he goes, but you have a California plate. So when we came home, I checked out, I went on the vehicle code, and I discovered that having a car in a foreign organization with California plates was a misdemeanor. So I immediately emailed the DOT. They have a really great online, you know, you can contact us online. So I contacted them online, and I said, it's almost verbatim. In fact, you might even have the wording right here from my email that I did. Oh, yeah, and I said, I am a non-resident alien with use of an automobile that is owned by a foreign trust that is recognized by the United States of America. What do I do with the plates? And I got a response back that said, take them back to the nearest Department of Motor Vehicles immediately. So I carried that in my car. I have my own plate on that one, and I carried that one in my car. But that was very cool. So, yeah, just to show you the idea of non-resident and the difference between resident. So the resident is required to have registration. The non-resident is not required. So
take the plates to the nearest location.
Yes, and they gave me a list of locations I could take them to, like a place where I could look up where to take them back. So anyway, that was kind of an exciting event. I hope that kind of answered the question.
Oh, that was great. Somebody else have questions for Jackie?
Top of the twilight there, young lady.
Hello, Somas.
Hello. Hey, you touched on a couple of very good points when you were mentioning the Oregon Revised Statutes, ORS, and it's the legislature has determined by a legislative act. What they're doing, and I'm sure most of the people on the call are aware of this, is they're administering the infant decedent's estate.
Yes.
Because nobody has come forward to claim they're alive, claim they're over the age of 21 or age of 18, done a revocation of the assumed, presumed powers of attorneys or attorneys' powers or any other powers they assume they have. And when you do this revocation of assumed, presumed power of attorney, you either publish it or you get it filed in your county where you are inhabiting or you're domiciled, and you notice the birth state, possibly the state where you did have a driver's license and or voter registration, and the current state you're living in. Obviously, if you're in the same state, you've only got two places to go. One place to go, the state that you were born in and you're currently living in. So see all that property, all those titles, those deeds, those birth certificates are attached to those so-called names, and they're all being held in abeyance. The voter, the residents, they're all claim property by the registrar by affidavit. Now, I'm not talking about the registrar of voters. I'm talking about the state registrar. What we found out in Michigan, California, Oregon, Florida, is that they have a process, and Curtis Cullenbach has brought this forward very well, and he's tied it to the Foundling, where the hospitals are actually doing a salvation operation or salvage operation to provide salvation for that infant decedent, i.e. that afterbirth. And what they're doing is that when that application comes in, the mother's, by her own pen, determines that the child was born out of wedlock by confessing that, she put down her maiden name, which is very, very feisty little trick by operation of law and constructive fraud. The county recorder, where the application goes to issue the county birth certificate and then being forwarded to the state registrar, the county registrar is determining the child was born out of wedlock, thus is a bastard orphan child. Then you have the second witness who does that, and that is the state registrar. And under Florida statutes 709.2109, it talks about the registrar has the authority to go ahead and issue an affidavit stating that the principal, i.e. the afterbirth, the infant decedent, is incompetent to handle his own affairs. And under Florida statutes, section 458 and 459, is the requirement that they're either a physician or an osteopathic physician. So the registrar is wearing three hats. He issues an affidavit stating that the principal is incompetent to handle his own affairs. So with the advent of the information that Ken Doss has brought forward, the will of the debt opinion letter going to the tax authority, I now believe that that is also happening from the state registrar level to follow that infant decedent from cradle to grave. And I don't know if you had a chance to read the case I sent you that came out of the Supreme Court regarding trademarks, but it's very interesting. You don't have to have a trademark registered in order to enforce it under the Langham Act under 43A. So,
if I may, do you have an actual question for Jackie?
Yes. What was the when they said in transit? They said the determination of the transit was 6 months. Is that correct?
Correct. 6 months, which is the same as a proof of life, by the way. It's only valid for 6 months.
Okay, so this sounds stupid, but 6 months calendar of what calendar? The Julian calendar or the Anno Dominion?
Here's the thing. No. Here's the thing, Somas. It's a rebuttable presumption. And while I totally understand what you're saying, however, here's the way I look at it. We had 10 commandments. Let's look at 10 commandments, nice and simple. And then what happened? They added all kinds of other crap on top of that. There's been, I don't know how many, 60,000 a year or something they add to the whole potload. What I'm advocating here is instead of adding more to the fire, we actually remove it. I understand what you're saying, and there's all these processes, but these processes take us down further down that road. And if you're, I don't look at it that we're being defrauded all the time or that they're treating us like an infant. We're acting like infants, and we're allowing this to happen. We're actually consenting, and while we sit in victim mode and feel sorry for ourselves, we're giving away our own power. Instead of taking responsibility for the things that we do and thinking, okay, I walked into the DMV, I asked for an application, I filled out that application, I signed it, and if you like, that was the sovereign walking in there and decreeing the vehicle code as my law and asking them to enforce it on me. So instead of taking responsibility for that, I'm going to sit around and say they're defrauding me and they're doing something wrong to me. So I really think that we need to take responsibility and start getting rid of these contracts, stop asking them for help, stop looking to them to solve our problems, and then complain when they don't solve them in the manner that we would like to solve them.
So I agree, but I think one of the foundational documents is the revocation of assumed presumed power of attorney. I really do. So anyway, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I yield.
All right. Thank you. And does anybody else out there have a question or a comment? Please step forward. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and speak up. If somebody else wants to jump in, just hit *6 and let us know. But I wanted to just add to what you were saying here, because the big part of the problem here are those presumptions that we have contracted with them, and we continue to contract with them. So, of course, we're acting as incompetent when we do that. And that's the reason that we're removing those contracts and removing those presumptions.
Yeah, and it's not a presumption at that point. It becomes evidence. And that's one of the things that we, it's not just a case of rebutting a presumption. So there is a presumption that exists if I have no contract and I'm in the state for 6 months. Then there's a presumption that I'm a resident, and all I need to do is say I'm not a resident of this state. That's the presumption. So if I'm in the state, and I'm using that term in normal English language, not in the legalese term. So I'm saying if I am literally within the state of, it's ridiculous how we can't even use our language without having to correct ourselves all the time. But anyway, if I happen to be inside the boundaries of the state of California or California Republic, that sounds better, for 6 months or longer, then I'm presumed to be a resident, and all I need to do is rebut that presumption. That's simple. The other things, so like if I apply for a tax exemption on my house when I register my ownership or record my ownership, that is evidence of residency. And it's all because I signed some form and I wanted a benefit. Let's face it. I wanted to put my kids in school. I wanted to attend college. I wanted that $7,000 a year that I get if I get that homeowner's exemption. So I was looking for that benefit. And in doing that, it's like dangling a carrot in front of me. They enticed me. So I'll go with enticement. They did dangle something that I wanted or needed. Actually, I really just wanted it. I can't say I really needed it because there's many people that are living without those contracts. So I wanted it out of convenience, and I was willing to sell my soul, if you like, to get that benefit, to have my 4 kids, at school and me to have maybe some peace for the day or something. I'm going to put it in, real terms here. We're human and there's things that we like convenience. And in doing that, I actually gave them evidence of residency, which is different than a rebuttable presumption. So,
gotcha.
Yes.
So really getting on that driver's license is a good first step for a lot of people, I would say, right? Learning to the right track.
Sure. The first step would be getting rid of your voter registration. So, if we go down these things, and that's what I want to do within our website, I want to make it for every state, but right now we have, we kind of have California, or will have California sewn up. So, voter registration, I think all of us know how to get rid of that. That's relatively easy. In California, you can go online and look up and check that you don't have that in the most of the places where you live. Most counties have that available. Not all, most. So that would be number one. Getting rid of a driver's license is definitely easy in California, but there is, little nuances you want to be careful of. There's a form, DL-142. Again, you've got to fill out both halves. Take that in, get a file stamped copy back. Make sure you get evidence. And I just explained to you why you need evidence of cancellation. Ken's order of cancellation is evidence of cancellation and gives them nowhere to go. I've seen it at least 5 times when they deal with him. I have other things, and I'm able to deal with stops as well, but not everyone else is, and that piece of paper really helps, or at least the evidence that you file stamped your cancellation. Then you're meeting them with evidence that is equal to them looking online and finding your driver's license in their database. So just, to recap on that, that's evidence. Registration, again, in California particularly, because they have this thing where they'll just keep going. If you don't renew your registration, they don't care. They'll hold that in the system for 7 years. Somewhere like South Dakota, they don't hold that in the system for 7 years. Do you have that affidavit from South Dakota? There's this great little affidavit that we found from South Dakota. I can probably find it faster. It's called an affidavit of non-residence for South Dakota. Okay, so it's a really great little document. I suggest, everybody get it and they can use it within their state. So, non-resident, now, let's see. He's printing it right now because for some reason it usually comes right up on my you win. Okay, you can just give me the wording. Okay, so the wording is, where's your...
This box screws up every once in a while.
Okay, just open that one up. Okay, it says, affidavit claiming lack of residence, post office address. So an applicant holding a South Dakota driver's license need not complete this affidavit. And then it says, and then you'd put your name, in conjunction with my South Dakota application for title and registration, do hereby declare and affirm that the following facts are true. I do not have a South Dakota's driver's license, and I do not maintain a residence post office address in South Dakota or any other United States jurisdiction. I love it.
Yeah.
And because I do not maintain a residence post office address in South Dakota or any other United States jurisdiction, the address I have provided with my South Dakota application for title and registration is strictly for mail forwarding purposes only. And then it says here, for purposes of this affidavit, the term residence post office address is defined as the place at which a person actually lives. So in other words, your domicile is not your residence. So that's really a great document. And we've used it in other instances where anyone, even tries to hint that we have a residence, then we would use that wording to tell them there's no residence in this state and no residence in any United States jurisdiction. So just kind of a nice piece.
Nice.
Yeah. So another evidence would be location of employment or place of business. We are able to set up businesses, and I know we talked a little bit about, associations and trusts. So if you create a foreign trust, it has no nexus to this state or the United States. It's actually created outside the jurisdiction of the United States, which is great. We've created like many of them, and then there's no social security number attached or anything like that. It's completely foreign and not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. From that, you can create other entities, such as associations, non-profit associations. I know we talked a little bit, like maybe the marshals might want to set something like that up. I'd like to point out that, the strongest associations would be the Bar Association. I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't want one. They're absolute, fabulous vehicle to use for creating your own rules. That's what the bar does, right? Or we could look at the Association of Sheriffs, or a big one would be the Notary Association, which they dictate policies that then are enforced on us as if they were law. You're going to have this type of ID or whatever not. All that comes from the Association of Notaries. I don't know if people realize that. It does not come from the Secretary of State. The law is very broad. The policy is very narrow. Even the vehicle code was created from an association, a highway association. So, that's how much they have an impact on our lives. And if, we did the same thing, we could have an equal impact. So another thing would be attendance. We already talked about dependence at primary and secondary schools. So what we hope to do through the website is create like a network of people who would be willing to help each other out, like families grouped together and, remove their kids from the system as much as possible. We have a guy now that has had a baby outside the system with a midwife that was also not in the system. So, I kind of feel like it's the Matrix or one of these other ones. We finally have one that's not only unplugged, but, not in the system. It's like great joy.
A lot of women are doing that now, having their babies.
It's just
at
great,
home.
yes. Yes, but not just
birth.
at home. Yes, it's important. Here's the thing. If you have a midwife, they are generally in the system, and they have to report the baby. So there you are. You go to all this trouble and all this, expense, and then they put you in because they need those statistics. So if you've done that, then it's really worth checking at the county recorders near you to see if there's just a baby with your last name and no other name that may be in the system. So, yeah, we really want to have midwives that are not licensed and in their system as well. We need a complete counterculture that is not part of their licensing and registering.
We really do. And at some point, we may even want to consider putting people in the hospitals to block the the ones that are there to snag babies, okay? I mean, every mom that is giving birth in a hospital needs to know what she's doing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, plus there's a lot of sickness that goes on in that arena, too. There's women out there that are just considered breeders. They prostitute and, just have babies, and then the state takes the babies, and Lord only knows what happens to them from there.
Yes, it's a very sick system. I know, like, attorneys get a really bad rap there, despicable people. We'll just leave it at that. But they are very entrenched in the system. Doctors, attorneys, any other professional is completely taken by the system. They often have, they get out of school, they have huge debt, and, they get eaten up because of it. They get put into these practices that if they had a love for law and they actually wanted to help people, that's all gone. It's the same with doctors. That gets kind of taken out of you. You learn very quickly that that's not going to happen. You're going to be towing the line, or else you'll lose your license, and they get threatened with the loss of, livelihood constantly. So, we really need people in those professions who are willing to give up that and, come on to the light side. So, yeah.
Yeah, which is that PMA starts really making sense to me. If we set up our membership association, of course we can also set up insurance and all kinds of things that are beneficial to people.
Well, I'm going to bring Ken in on this a little bit because you had a group before where you had medical and you guys got together. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, yeah. Okay. It was a group I found online. It was called Christian Care MediShare, and this guy had set up this whole process basically for churches that their members could have affordable health care. And so the whole membership group would share in the medical expenses of that month. So if somebody had a surgery, it was $10,000. It got divided between, I think it was maybe 1,000 members or 2,000 members. So it wasn't very much we had to pay at any given time. So it worked really well.
And then what happened?
Nice.
That one, I think, might still be going.
Might still be going?
Yeah, but they're complying with the insurance laws, too.
Okay.
So, but now Joseph had another one that was similar. So there was another program that a friend of mine had where it was for auto insurance, proof of financial responsibility, based on the same premise of a group sharing in the expenses every month of the auto accident. That group was smaller, and so it was sometimes a little more expensive because we didn't have as many members to, spread the costs around on. But it worked also. But it got shut down by the insurance company.
By the insurance companies. So you may encounter some issues, but in terms of an association or foundations, any of those kind of vehicles would be good for something like that, and you could certainly provide for your members. We have one right now. We have and I don't really want to say its name, but we have it's something that helps to it's an entity that repossesses cars that are impounded by cops. Let's put it that way. So if your car is impounded, we can go pick it up, and you're a member of our association, we can go pick that up. So, we're starting to form these associations, and here's, you still have to pay the impound fees, although you could sue the cop afterwards. But, our idea right now is, let's get that auto back as quickly as possible. Some people, they lose their livelihood. You lose your car, you lose your livelihood. So, we're able to get them back, like the next day. So it's much cheaper, but you also don't have to pay release from the police department or whatever law enforcement it took it, impounded it. So, so those are some of the associations that you can do.
Nice. Okay, great. Anybody else out there have questions for Jackie? Well, it's definitely an experience learning to do these things, and it can be nerve-wracking while you're going through it. Right now, I don't have everything done for my license, but I do have private plates. I haven't turned in my plates and my license yet. But that's kind of on my agenda as one of the very next things I need to get done.
Okay.
And
here's the thing. If you have this set up, and, we're willing to help people, and I think we should have one in every state, an entity an association that you can belong to that helps with things like, repossessing a car or whatever not. It's nice to have a safety net. Our membership is like $25. It's not about the money. It's about the grouping together. And if someone's car gets taken, then, two people just go pick it up within your association. Paperwork generated, and two people can go get it. So, that makes a lot of difference. It's also nice if we start, if we do have, people who are professionals, maybe if there's a tow truck driver that and you bring them into the association. And so, you start to network and have, useful people as well within there. And, doctors, start helping each other. They have a lot of tax issues. So having a doctor in your association might be as easy as finding one that you're going to help who has tax issues. In fact, they do have a lot of tax issues.
No doubt.
So, yes.
If I may.
Sure.
Hey, this is Captain Kev. Maybe
Hi.
the Continental Marshals would be a good venue for your association for repossessing cars.
Absolutely.
Right? Right?
Absolutely. Yes, we need the enforcement. Yes, that and more. Yes, absolutely. And, of course, when you set up your association of continental marshals, then when you start to list your policies, it's a little bit like, the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts have rules. Those are for the Boy Scouts. But those policies, they get taken on pretty far. They're very far-reaching. And, like I say, most of these codes actually began with associations. So, once your membership grows, your policies get widely applied and to all the members. So, yeah, it's great.
May I?
Yes.
Jackie, did you say that the website is down for internally placed persons.org?
Yes, it should be. I think it's down. Steve's working on it. Yeah, we're having some technical difficulties because, we want to provide a lot of information, and I don't want it all on one page. I want it,
okay.
Yeah, nice and, so that when you go on it, it looks clear and clean, and you can click on what you want and just go straight to what you want.
Very good. One other question. Would you be available tomorrow afternoon for about a 5 or 7 minute chat?
Yeah, sure.
1 o'clock your time?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, I'll call you at 1 o'clock promptly. Thank you very much, and I yield.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
If I may.
Go ahead.
Hey, Jackie, this is Robert down in Georgia. It sounds like a lot of what you're hinging on the driver's license is not having the status of a resident. Is that correct?
Say that again.
Well, it sounds to me like in not obtaining a driver's license, it's hinging on the fact that you're claiming not to be a resident of the state. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yes.
Okay.
I wouldn't want that status of residency.
Okay. The problem that I see that us having in Georgia is that the Supreme Court of Georgia has ruled that it's not your status as a resident or a non-resident that matters. There's actually a compact between 44 of the 50 states dealing with non-resident motorists and how to handle non-resident motorists. And so regardless of your status, the Georgia statutes and codes require, this is statutes and codes, require that every person operating a motor vehicle be licensed, be a licensed driver. And it is not the status of you being a resident or a non-resident that matters. It is the fact that you are operating a motor vehicle and you are a non-resident or a resident. It says each person. So how do you combat that?
Please define person.
Okay, well, in Georgia, a person is defined as a corporation.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that's under the definitions under OCGA. Person is defined as a corporation. It says includes. We know what includes means. But when you say that you're not a resident and you're operating a motor vehicle and you don't have a license, the compact between 44 states of the 50, they're bound by that compact of how they treat you as a non-resident operating a motor vehicle. And they do it, regardless of whether or not you claim to be a non-resident, especially here in Georgia.
I think each state has some differences. The term person is very specific, and in California, specifically as it relates to highways, it does use the term individual, but that individual is not us either. An individual is like one member in a group of a business. So like one member of the board of directors is an individual within the board of directors. An individual is the status between the person, the single person, and they are persons because they've already registered under the code, and the group as such. Also here it is, this state is a person. So as we know in our vehicle code, it applies to state employees, operators of state property, and persons in commerce who have registered and who have licensed. So Georgia's laws I have not looked at, and here specifically we know when we get stopped, the tie-in to the residence is important. And we tested that quite a lot. And
well,
go on.
What I was going to say was it's not so much, and this is the, you have to look at the non-resident violators compact between those 44 states, which had to be approved by Congress to begin with because it's interstate, so Congress controls it, and it's called, I don't have the act in front of me, but it allowed, and this started back in the 50s. I think Nevada was one of the first states, and it grew from there. So there's only 4 states now that aren't involved in it. But because of this is like a treaty among the states.
I'm familiar with it.
Okay. So the laws that they're enforcing are not necessarily just your state codes. They're actually enforcing the non-resident violators compact, and they have to, by treaty, if you want to look at it that way, because that's what it is. They have to enforce that, and that's how it gets enforced. And it deals with everything from the service. Dealing with those who don't have a driver's license who are non-residents. And so my point in asking that is how do you circumvent that if you're claiming to be a non-resident when it's not the residency status that requires you to have a driver's license?
Well, in your case, it would be a non-person, right? If person is defined in that particular code, and all persons are required to have a driver's license. In fact, the application for the driver's license in California is what then defines you as the person under the code. So, for instance, I've got Virginia code right in front of me, and it says when registration by non-resident is not required, and then it gives you, and that does relate to that. It says, notwithstanding other provisions of this article, any non-resident from a state that does not require the registration of a vehicle like that owned by such non-resident, when such vehicle is owned and operated by a resident of Virginia in the state in which the foreign vehicle owned or operated by such non-resident is registered, shall not be required to register such vehicle in the Commonwealth. So, for instance, in California, under 260B, you're not required to register your car if it's a passenger car that's not used for commercial purposes. In Oregon, it's the same thing. It's a commercial usage. So, in that case, I would also, under that compact, I would not be required to register it in Virginia either.
Okay. Well, so you're in California.
I'm in California.
And you're in California.
Yes.
Okay. You've got a strong, and you've probably answered this 100 times on some of these calls. But how long have you been on the continental United States?
I arrived here in 1987.
87?
Yeah.
Have you gone through the process of naturalization, or are you not a citizen, or?
Yes, I have gone through naturalization. Yeah.
Okay. So you've gone through the process of naturalization. So there is a record that you're a naturalized citizen of the United States.
Naturalized, yep, absolutely. I have a certificate of naturalization.
Okay, so you are a citizen of the United States by the process of naturalization.
I have a certification of naturalization.
Okay. So you are a U.S. citizen.
Back in the 50s, there's a choice of whether you want to be a citizen or not. A citizen of the United States or a citizen of your state.
Okay. So but are you a U.S. citizen now, or are you?
I wouldn't accept U.S. citizen. I would accept California citizen, a citizen of California. That would be my choice.
But you went through the process of naturalization.
Went through the choice. I did. I went through the process of naturalization in California.
In California, but at that particular time, At that particular time, though, I don't believe that the naturalization that you're referring to was allowed by the states after the So you actually went through the process of naturalization, and your certificate probably says that you're a U.S. citizen, correct?
Actually, it doesn't use that term. It just says it's naturalized. It says, actually, I probably couldn't find it right now. I don't know if it actually uses that term. And according to Richard McDonald, who I spent quite a bit of time with, I mean, he's into the state citizenship. It is also part of a claim. Also, if you look at the 14th Amendment, it's also part of a claim. So I think it's up to you to decide on whether you are or not, and it's not for somebody else to say whether you are or not.
Well, no, I mean the only reason why I'm asking that is and it's not to be argumentative. It's that the record, and when those who might be listening to this down the road on a recording or what have you hear, well, I'm not going to be a resident, so I don't have to get a driver's license. But yet there's a compact, there's a treaty between the 44 of the states that state that's fine. But if you're a non-resident, you still have to have a driver's license because there's a compact here. And then in addition to that, you've got, and I'm going to use that because I don't know of anyone else on this call who actually has a certificate of naturalization. You actually have a record of naturalization showing that you were naturalized in the United States.
Sure, you have a birth certificate would be the same. That's what that is. It's a new.
Well, actually, a birth certificate is not necessarily that you were born in the United States, because most of our birth certificates of live birth show that you were born within a state, and it doesn't even say that you were born in the state of. For instance, mine says I was born in Georgia, and there's not even a zip code on there or anything else pertaining to that. It may be registered at the county level, at the state level, and then also at the federal level, but it's evidence of where I was born, and it shows that I was born in Georgia, not the state of Georgia.
Sure. All the ones I've seen here are usually state of California.
Okay. So, this is where I'm trying to get at, is that if there's those out there who are also naturalized citizens, who were naturalized into the United States, that are claiming not to be, and that's fine. You don't have to be a resident. But those who are, you could be born in Washington, D.C. and not be a resident of any of the other 50 states and only be a citizen of the United States.
Sure.
Yep. But you inhabit California. You're a naturalized citizen into the United States, and is in Georgia. It's not the requirement that you're a citizen or non-citizen. Resident or non-resident. The exemption is that of a citizen. In Georgia, non-citizens are not required to have licenses. In your case, if you were in Georgia, you can't claim not to be a citizen because you actually have a certificate of naturalization, which states that you are a citizen, correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it says that, and I'm not sure that I would claim that. But let's go on with that.
Okay, and like I said, I'm just trying to walk through that process.
Sure.
Just so that others that might be listening might have a better understanding that are here, that we're not born in a state.
Georgia.
Right. Exactly. Because this does raise a question, and that is, we've got someone here who was born, and I guess y'all have had the Naturalization Act in England now, so I guess y'all are considered citizens and no longer considered subjects there, but if you're a citizen, you are a subject, so that's sort of an oxymoron anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Okay. So you come to the United States, you come here to the continental United States, and you go through the process of naturalization. So you have a certificate, and the only reason to go through the process of naturalization is to obtain citizenship. So you obtain citizenship in the United States, and then for some period of time, you were a resident of California. I would presume at some point in time you were a resident, or you claim to be a resident, and you're untying that resident.
Okay. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Untying the residency.
So if the requirement for a driver's license in most of the states is only vacated if you're a non-citizen, and actually it states that non-citizens may be issued. So you can be issued one, but it's not a requirement that you have one. And for some of those of us who, for convenience sake, will take one if they're going to give it to me for their convenience as much as it is for mine, we may be willing to do that. But in your case, you can't claim that you're a non-citizen.
Well, hold on a second. Let's just go there a second. So you're saying that in Georgia they just issue you one, you don't have to apply?
OCGA 40-5-20, if you go down to the second paragraph, it states that non-citizens, in paragraph 1 it says, all persons except those explicitly exempt. So you go down to the second paragraph and it says non-citizens may be issued one without surrendering, blah, 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 and it says this exemption. Oh. That is the exemption. Non-citizens are exempt from having to have a driver's license, which is understandable. Since 1868, when the 14th Amendment was ratified and Georgia was allowed back in, the Congress put a strong stipulation on us that we had to do certain things. Well, the state legislature opted through the people, when we ratified our Constitution, was to only allow the definition of a citizen back into our Constitution, which was a citizen of the United States, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and resident in the state. Prior to that, citizens of the state of Georgia were only citizens of the state of Georgia. They were not a U.S. citizen. So once the 14th Amendment came along and we had to ratify our new Constitution in 1868, we opted to only use the definition of citizen in our Constitution as that as a U.S. citizen, and effectively removed all previous related definitions of a citizen. We are now just the people. That's it. So you will not see in our Constitution any use of the word citizen unless it's directly related to those of
the United States. Is there a definition in Georgia for in this state?
You know, I'm going to go back. I heard you saying that earlier, and I just don't, as many times as I've been through those statutes, I don't recall seeing that particular definition. I think what you're going to find is Georgia, most of the southern states, even Florida, those who had to rewrite their constitutions in 1868 because of the succession, it changed some things. But
I have Florida's. I have Kentucky's. I've got about, I think, 13, 14 states.
Yeah. Well, Georgia's, and I want to say, Georgia's really interesting because we had the 1861, then the 1865. And if you go back even to look at the code books that were in place back in the 1860s, it's interesting to look at the definitions pre-14th Amendment because it actually talks about the definition of a person. Definition of a person pre-14th Amendment was a corporation, but it also included the black man. So and if you look at the old code books like that, it's just really interesting to look at the historical, how things have changed, but how they really haven't changed. All they've done now is drop the, you still have to be a corporation in order to be a person in Georgia. Yep.
So for you to, is it possible for you to not have a driver's license then? Or you just say you're not a citizen?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not easy for any, and I don't have one now. And the irony of that is, I'm dealing with some stuff now. People are scratching their head how they're going to deal with this. They're having to, folks within the general legislatures as well as local governments, they're just as dumbfounded on this as many of us are trying to get out of it. It's new to them. These cops on the side of the road don't necessarily understand all of this. You can't expect that our local sheriffs and I think maybe most of our state patrols have a better understanding of it, but our local yokels, they don't have a clue. They just think you're supposed to give them a driver's license and be done with it. So they're going through this process as we are, and that's the reason why so many of us are finding ourselves in very compromised situations. Just like you had your car impounded, that guy didn't really know what he was doing. Most likely, he didn't know what he was doing. So we're having to educate them as well as educate ourselves. They're bucking us, educating them, and they're the ones with the gun, so they're able to do what they want to do, so it's creating problems for us. But my point in asking this question was, knowing that to be the case, I just want to make sure that anyone listening to this phone conversation in the future knows that there is a compact out there, and it deals with non-residents. So it's not just your status as being a non-resident that removes you from the requirement of a driver's license. You have to look at your state you have to look and make sure that your state also, states that non-citizens may also are exempt from having to have a driver's license.
Yeah, on that, you might even have some answers on this. So the strange thing about the term in this state, with all these different states that have it, Texas is the only one that defines it a little. I mean, they all define it somewhat a little different, although the structure is pretty much all the same. But Texas actually refers to it as the United States. The others all have United States of America, which, we're kind of trying to find why there's this difference. And obviously, Texas was a republic, so we're kind of wondering if that's what it is. But
well, Texas is a republic, but even Georgia, when we ratified our Constitution as a requirement, it had to be in a Republican form. So we actually are a republic, a Republican government.
It's a representative form.
Yeah, Republican
it's
form.
It's a little different, though, than having, Texas had the republic before all this happened. The others accepted a Republican form of government. It's a little different. But Texas actually defines it. It says, in this state means within the exterior limits of Texas and includes all territory within these limits ceded to or owned by the United States. All the others will say United States of America.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. We're wondering why there's this difference in that code. So, but that's really interesting. And you're right. There's also reciprocity that people, having cars from out of state and stuff like that. So there's reciprocity agreements between the states as well. So, yeah, it's really worth kind of knowing all those things. But so far, we haven't had an issue. And the other thing is there has to be a nexus, that nexus being the contract itself. It's a private, here in California anyway, it's private code, and that nexus is required for them to have jurisdiction. Otherwise, what happens is, we have a lot of, people from Mexico that come here and drive. Generally, when they get taken to court, the response of the judge is, go get a license. And so, they go get a license, and next time they get a fine. So, they weren't fined when they didn't have the license. They're just told to go get one.
Do you understand? And let me inject this. Do you understand the purpose of a license? The true purpose of a license?
Well, to drive into a war zone.
No, and I'm not talking about a driver's license. I'm talking about the purpose of the license itself.
Well, it's something that would otherwise be illegal.
Well, in that definition, yeah. But even when you're looking at in the historical, going back centuries ago, the sovereignty of a nation is the sovereignty of a nation. And so if you have, let's just say, for instance, a representative, let's just say a prince from another nation coming into this nation here, he is only allowed to pass on another sovereign's territory or land by license. Without that license, he is presumed to have accepted the authority and the jurisdiction of the foreign nation. And without that license, he's subject to the laws of the king in which he's foreign. And that's the purpose of that license. So if the state, and this is where folks have to really grasp what it means to be a citizen of the United States. When you come into Georgia, and you're a citizen of the United States, you're foreign. You better have a license, because Georgia is a independent and sovereign state, and nobody can argue that it's not. It is. The Treaty of Paris recognized that. It's recognized today. Georgia is a free, sovereign, and independent state. We are foreign to South Carolina and every other state that's out there. So if you come into this state and you're a citizen of the United States, you're actually coming from a foreign state in and of itself. You better have a license. And that's a fact. That goes back to the laws of nations. And a lot of folks, when they hear this, they think, well, I'm going to get rid of my license because I don't have to have one. I'm a sovereign man. But if you're a citizen of the United States, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a Georgia, what we would used to call a Georgia state citizen, and now they'll call it a people of Georgia. You are a foreigner to this land. You may, and it is up to the general legislature of this state in order to enact laws to protect the rights, benefits, and privileges of such citizenship. That citizenship that they're referring to is that of a U.S. citizen. So those are the things that people really have to consider is if I'm a U.S. citizen and you come into Georgia, you better have a license because, in essence, you are foreign to this state. And the general legislature writes laws to protect your rights, your benefits, and your privileges while you're here in this state. And this state states through its general legislature that you're going to have a license. And if you come here and you don't have one, regardless of whether or not you're a resident or not, you're going to have a problem. Now, if you're not a citizen, that's different because non-citizens aren't required to have a license. But in your case, you've already stated that you're a naturalized citizen. And that's what I'm concerned about right there. Not that I'm wanting to argue that, not that I think it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that you have to understand the purpose of a license. If you come into a foreign territory, you're only exempt from those laws by that license. And that's in the laws of nations. I yield.
Thank you. That's a very good point, and it would always be very good to know if any of those other states have that same issue. It's very interesting. So, thank you.
All right. Anybody else out there have questions for Jackie?
This is VLT.
Or comment?
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah. Ed, the gentleman from Georgia has some very, very good points, but the unfortunate part I'm seeing in his dissertation there is that he's mixing apples and oranges. That means persons. You don't see the word people used in anything that he's talking about. You're only talking about persons. And you have to understand this nation, Georgia, and then every other state of which are in this state are all commercial operations. There is no doubt about it. You can't argue it any way, shape, or form. And they are in that veneer that floats above the land. So when you are on the land of Georgia is one thing. But if you're in the state of Georgia, you're in that political enclave. And that's true with virtually every state in the pseudo-union, what it is, because the fact of the matter is the United States is a corporation itself. And I can prove that corporationship, and therefore we have the right of self-determination. It comes from God. It doesn't come from anybody else. And that permeates the whole of the land around the earth, and it's been declared by the United Nations, which Georgia and all the states of the 50 unions are part of that agreement and that understanding. And with that standing, the idea of the license, you can't come into the state of Georgia with another state's license. You have to get a permit from the state of Georgia. It wouldn't make any difference if you had a license in Kentucky. What the hell's that got to do with Georgia? It doesn't. It has to be from Georgia. So if that's what you want to have, and that's what you do. You're going to do that. Take a cab. What the hell? You don't need a license. You don't need a cab driving license, but they'll tell you, oh, you're riding in the passenger seat. Oh, you're a passenger. And guess what you are when you're a passenger?
Yeah, fat paying.
You're another paying commercial entity.
Yeah.
You see, and the point of it is, people are not even dealt with in the terms that are used in the statutes and codes. It's always persons, and those persons derive from the naturalization, or I should say, the natural person. And the natural person is created by the man who creates the duality when he first registers the name. So when we're born, we are born a living being. But what happens is there was a birth, which is not being born of a commercial entity. And if you mix those two up, you lose all the power of your freedom. The idea is to separate yourself from the entity. Now you can control the entity, and you can be absolute. You're the engineer of that train, and there's two rails on that railroad track. And as you, as the engineer of that train, you have to like be on both tracks. One of them has to do with the commercial aspect, and the other one's the freedom aspect. And in the middle of that is where you carry your operations of activities in your life. And if you are engaged in commerce, yes, you do need a license. Why? Because you're in their commerce. Whereas this is very interesting notation here. After having done a credit check on myself, this is very interesting. If you go through your own personal credit check, they even know what kind of occupation you have. But I don't have one because I've always handled things myself. And you know what was written on that occupation? It said hunter and gatherer. And I thought, wow, that's really, really interesting. You know, because where did they come up with this idea that I was a hunter and gatherer, except for the fact that somebody had this body had a bank account, but they couldn't account how the money came in and how the money left. It's not much different than basically having a quiver of arrows on your side and you're going out hunting every day for your general welfare, whether it's hunting or whatever. So this idea of the license is right if you're going to be in their world. When you're not going to be in their world, it means you're not going to interface with their commerce. There's no reason to have a license. Now, if you're going to go into another state, it would be a good idea to say, do I need a permit to operate a car or a carriage in this land if I'm not engaged in commerce? Because the Supreme Court has already declared no one needs a license to do that which is one of our freedoms, and they can't change a freedom into a privilege and then charge you money for it. This has all been settled, and this is where it comes back to the argument, or not so much the argument, but the fact that in this state means that commercial entity. When I went into court one time, I was. It's an immense story, but the judge asked me because I wasn't using a license plate on the car. And then she says to me, she says, in this state, you are required to have a license on a car. Do you understand? And I said, I hear what you're saying. She says, I need you to understand. I said, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not driving an automobile or a motor vehicle in this state according to the rules of definitions of words and terms that are created by the statutes and codes. I'm traveling over an easement. As a matter of fact, those highways are only easements. They do not belong to the highway patrol or any other patrol, unless, of course, you have a toll road, which is privately owned. But they would like you to think so. So you have to go through these phases of giving notice to the system. And if you don't give notice to the system, then you assume that the system all runs on assumption and presumption until you can prove otherwise. And that's why the residency facts that we have brought up in 516 of the California Vehicle Code are so important, because it establishes the evidence, as Jackie has said before, it establishes the evidence that points to residency, and residency is a status. And residency is composed of two words. One is res, that means property, and the identity of the property. So I won that court case, and how I won that court case is I had an LLC with my same name on it. So they were attacking me, trying to make me the surety for this thing. And when I showed them, I said, why don't you turn to page 17 of my brief there, Judge? And the district attorney's trying to bring the hammer on me. And he says, what does that say there? It says that name is an LLC in another state. And here it is. It's whoever entered the docket, this information into this case, it says that the defendant said this, that, this, that, and this, and that, and this, and that. And I was here at every one of those cases, one of those hearings, and I never saw the defendant once. And I never heard him once. So the question is, who fraudulently input this information into the docket? And you should have seen the district attorney just put his hands in his head, and he knew he was liable for that bond because he knew he didn't have any subject matter jurisdiction. He didn't have any personam jurisdiction. And this is what it comes down to, jurisdiction. Anyway, I want to put
thank you for sharing that. That was excellent.
Just to emphasize the word person, well, I have a definition that actually comes from our Highway Act that came in March 20th, 1950. And it's very clear about who the person is. So person includes any individual, and I explained what an individual was earlier. Firm, co-partnership, joint venture, association, corporation, estate trust, business trust, receiver, syndicate, this state, any county, city, and county municipality, district, or other political subdivision thereof, or any other group or combination acting as a unit, which helps to define the word individual as being a single member within that unit. So, like when they say solely, separately, and severally. So that would be the solely and separately. So that's from 1950. So that's, not before the 14th Amendment or anything else. It's current. That's part of our highway, and it's also when this compact started to come out. It also defines in that same section the term in this state, which is the location of where, this is going on. So it's in this state, or in the state means within the exterior limits of the state of California, and includes all territory within these limits owned by or ceded to the United States of America. And then it just goes on, department means the Department of Motor Vehicles. So, that's how our particular vehicle code is constructed. So, and I would pretty much bet that somehow it does permeate through all of them. There's usually a few different wordings, but it would be interesting to find in this state from, the definition of that from all the states. And it would, help to clear some of these things up. But it is a mental construct with territory. So.
Lovely. That's wonderful. Really good information, you guys. This is, we're discovering and sharing information on how to sever our ties with Babylon or exit Babylon. And, that's where we are in time. There's a lot of things happening all around the planet, exciting things, good things. I think, I see some good things coming. So avoid the fear-mongering. There's a lot of that going on, too. We want to keep people afraid. It does take guts to stand up and do this. It's not the kind of thing that you necessarily want your elderly to be trying, although they're the ones who will probably do it.
On that, I'd like to just quickly say 2 successes we've had really well this month, and to do with taxes. We have an 88-year-old guy. We managed to get $6,095 back for him off of the IRS, which was a first for us to actually get something back. And then we just had a release of $5.1 million in IRS tax liens. So, so you're right. There's a lot of good things going on right now. And
that is excellent.
Yes.
And there's another article where they just lost a bunch in with the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Big case. Yeah. So, but there's been a lot of effort put on that. I mean, look at the guy, what's his name? The one who he went to jail and he had to prove it. They put him through hell. He's got the SEDM.org site.
SEDM, yes, SEDM or Fam Guardian.
Yes.
Yeah, he lives kind of close to me. He's amazing. Yeah. I puts a lot of information out there. Definitely worth visiting his website. So.
And he's got the book, the IRS, The Great Hoax, the IRS, The Great, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the book, but that has won cases, the book.
Yeah. He's a great researcher. I had sent you the stuff that came from his website before on, I think it's like 6 different states with their driver's license. So, yeah, it's really worth visiting his website, Fam Guardian or SEDM, and you'll see he's done an amazing amount of work. He's, amazing researcher, definitely. So...
Yeah, definitely. So, the progress has been made. It's being made. And now, with this whole thing going on with people's Treasury Direct accounts, that's something that you guys, I encourage you to keep your eyes on, because that is opening up. And the information that I'm getting, is that this is all being done on very high levels too, and so many of them are thrilled that people are going to be able to access their accounts. So, this is the time to get your heart right as we're exiting Babylon, because the last thing in the world we want to do is deal with more greed. And this is about taking away the greed, taking away the ability for people to operate that way, but making sure that people have plenty, and it's your inheritance, it's your trust. So we all came into the world with one. It just got hijacked, so to speak. So exiting Babylon and correcting your status and acting like you are ready, You have to be able to show that you're ready to manage your own affairs and self-govern. You don't need to be governed. That's been a big part of our lesson, I think, is learning how to manage things yourself and not contract with the government, because every time you do, you're saying that you're incompetent and that you need them. So, really good information. Anybody out there have any questions, comments? Floor is open.
If I may.
Sure.
Marshall Schubert here. Just wanted to let everybody know about the Marshall's Call tomorrow. If you're interested in becoming a Marshal and helping out with the program that we've got going here, please tune in tomorrow night at 9 Eastern Standard at the same number that you called to get in tonight and same access code. And thank you. I yield.
Wonderful. Yeah, this is definitely time to be involved, with people who are making changes. And I'm going to be the first one to stand up and say, I've seen the changes being made. And this is, definitely been a long, hard road. And I'm not saying that it's going to get easy real quick, but I think it's going to get a lot easier soon for everybody. Things are really starting to shake down. And we need marshals, and we need other people too, grand jury members, and we all have a part to play in this. And if you can't do one thing, do the other.
May I ask a question?
Certainly.
In terms of the marshals and the grand juries, are you guys keeping lists? Is there anything I can pass out here? Are there any representatives in California?
We have quite a few people from California that join in on the national calls, National Assembly calls oftentimes, and there's Dominic out there, and he's real active, and we've got others out there too. I don't have good information on that, but someone else on the call probably does.
Okay, I know Dominic, so I could call him.
Okay.
Thank you. I yield.
Certainly. Thank you. Anybody else out there? I know you're dying to say something. Anybody have any news to share? Okay, well, maybe we're coming up on the top of the second hour here.
If I may.
And
there you go.
Sure, go ahead.
This is Captain Kev again. Wanted to make an announcement that the National Assembly calls are currently being reposted to the Colorado Prepper YouTube channel. And also wanted to say that, Jackie, you should join the Thursday National Assembly call, and you could talk to some of the California representatives on the call. And I yield.
Okay. That would be great. We're trying to, invite as many people as possible onto some of these calls. The Thursday National Assembly call is definitely the one that we're just really trying to encourage people to get on and get involved. Find a place, because there's people all over doing things. And we're trying to bring a lot of these groups together. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. How do you get on the you have to push the *6 in order to get on?
To get into the queue?
Well, I guess so. So you don't have a just unmute and say "May I," right?
Well, I'm not the moderator.
Santa Claus, you did whatever you did to get in the queue. You did it successfully, and it's your turn to ask a question.
Okay. When you say that if you how does it go here? Anyway, that if you get a license or whatever, that you're acknowledging that you're incompetent, right?
That is what I'm saying, yes.
Yeah. Who made that rule?
Asking for permission. You're asking for permission to do something that is a right and not a privilege.
Okay, who made that rule? And when were we made aware of? Is that legitimate? That if you're not made aware of that, that's what you're doing. If you're led to believe from before you're born, see, I was led to believe I had to get a driver's license.
Well, we all were. Okay. Unfortunately, you were lied to, and we all were.
Yeah.
Okay. We had to learn the difference.
That invalidates the theory or concept that they perpetrate, that you're volunteering or admitting that you're incompetent. I can't remember. I'm sorry. I'm having a heck of a time with my head. Whatever it is, when you just said it,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
What state are you in?
I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Oh, in Ohio? Okay. Have you ever found in your statutes, I think aren't they the Ohio Revised Statutes? I'm not sure, but I think so. Have you ever found in there the part, like where you fill out the application? Have you read any of that code to do with vehicles, the operation of vehicles? Oh, okay.
No, I'm stranded in Cincinnati. I'm originally from Michigan.
Oh, okay.
When I was charged with driving without a license, and I was in the court, quote, and I asked the prosecutor to produce a law that said I had to get a driver's license. He went and copied a page out of the Uniform Traffic Code of Michigan and yellow highlighted a section that said licensee must carry on their person at all times their driver's license and display it to a police officer whenever asked. And I pointed out to the jury and to the judge and everything that doesn't say anyone has to get a license. It says
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says licensee.
I've never seen anywhere where anything says you have to.
Exactly.
Where there's a code, a statute, or anything that you're just led to believe you have to.
Yeah, I went and got my first one here because my mother-in-law said I needed one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. It is. A lot of us feel cheated, and but then I have to think as well. What was my part in that? Because I'm hoping that we're going to be building a more responsible, a more we don't want people just running around unlicensed, injuring people and not giving a damn. I mean, that's not what I'm advocating here at all. And I think it's important that we be responsible, and good to each other. You know, if let's put it this way, one of the best stories I've ever heard is a lady gets out of her car and accidentally knocks the car that was parked next to where she parked. And so she got out her card and left a little note on the windshield that said, you know, I may have dinged your car. Please, you know, here's my information. You know, contact me or whatever not. And, you know, most people would just walk off and leave that. I mean, that's a real, you know, awesome lady. And she made the point of saying, I like to be responsible for the things that I do wrong. And that's, you know, a wonderful thing to hear somebody say. Most of us are trying to get out of, you know, being responsible, reliable, or liable for things that we do. So do you have a license right now?
No.
Okay. So, and would you go get one?
I take the fifth.
That's very good.
Well, I've got quite a story. I mean, I don't get into my story, but I've got quite a story.
It does sound
Maybe
like
this
it.
is a good time for you to get into your story, Santa Claus. You know, I've been listening to you for 2 years, and I don't think I've heard it.
Who's that?
I put him on the spot. Are you blushing?
No.
I'm interested to hear it.
Yeah, what is your story? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you'd have to hear my whole life story. But,
my goodness.
I mean, you know,
you sound young.
I was conscripted in the military service when I was 19 years old. And like I say,
I thought you said
Santa
Claus, I thought you said you fell off the turnip truck last night.
Yeah.
You're not that young.
Right.
You're not that old. Marshall Schubert, I was just joking with you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So, the reason I bring that up is I say I now understand that a human being is perfectly capable of believing two completely contradictory ideas. And the ones I'm mentioning, ones I'm thinking of, is that being that you're free and that you can also be forced into military service, which then on and on it goes. But
right, you know, there's a lot.
The jury found me guilty of driving without a license, even though the prosecutor couldn't produce a law. And I ended up, the judge, this was on a Friday, once again I will get, okay, and he said he would sentence me on Monday, and 339 days later, my brother made a deal with him that if I got a driver's license, I never was sentenced. Apparently, this was in 1991, apparently I'd still be there if my brother hadn't thought of, what he said was, if I make my brother get a driver's license, will you let him out of jail? And the de facto judge said yes, and so I got one. You know, if they'd have made that offer to me a week into my incarceration or being held hostage, I would have sure. I mean, I proved to you didn't have any law, and you proved to me it didn't matter. So.
Yeah, it sounds like that's about how that went there. But, you know, still I'm going to say that exercising your right to travel is a pretty good testing ground to see how you're going to do in general. Because if you can manage that and learn to be free, then you're going to be able to tackle a lot of things going forward. And we have to be that way. You know, we can't buy into the fear, and we always have to know that we're always at risk.
Yeah, I think the freedom to travel is, you know, really a basic right. And I've had my own incarceration stories, and you know, my bail was $920,000. So I know I said that a little bit on the video. I was a $1 million baby, basically, when I was in there. And that was for driving without a license at that time. And the reason my bail got to be so big is because every time they got me, because I don't believe in going into court unless I have a warrant. But at the same time, I was trying to get a divorce, and in that court was a whole different court. So every time I showed up for the divorce, they kept coming to arrest me on the traffic, and so they would get me. I would immediately get out, and the way that I would immediately get out is because of the way that I signed. So I wouldn't sign as me. I signed as the authorized representative, and we had some interesting debates with the sheriff's department. And one time I got out so quickly that I was back in family law court for my divorce that same afternoon, much to the judge's dismay. And, and so that my bail eventually was $920,000, which was just incredible for driving without a license. But the judge was really upset.
Right. My goodness.
I ended up with a $100 fine, so and I didn't pay it, so that's
$100 fine with a almost $1 million bond, huh?
Yeah. And the reason I never paid it is because there was a guy that had come to all my my court dates whenever they brought me in there, and it was pretty funny because you got to imagine Montana, the court there, the district attorneys hated me. They knew every time I had any kind of traffic issue that there was going to be a lot of work for them. I would actually make them do pleadings and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was pretty funny. So when they finally did get me in Orange, and I was stressed out, all the district attorneys in the area came, and they took up 3 rows in my courtroom. They were all so happy. And it took every ounce of, I don't know what you call it, to, I just stood there and smiled with my head held high. And I managed to negotiate a $100 fine. And it was pretty funny. So on the way out, some guy that had been there with me throughout, like he'd come and watched, he offered to pay my fine, and they refused to accept payment at that time. So I told them, well, then that's discharge. So it was pretty funny. But anyway.
Yeah. Wow. Well, there are some funny stories that come out in all of this. We get to hear these things, the encounters that we have, and they can be comical. I mean, the first encounter I had with an officer, where he pulled me over, and I was mad to begin with because he pulled me over in a place where I didn't have cell phone reception. And then I asked him, where the injured party was and what he was doing, pulling me over. And, he kind of did a take back, and we ended up parting with mutual respect is kind of the way we left it. I let him know I was Continental Marshal and showed him my oath of office. And that, burned his hand or something. He threw it. I handed it to him. He took it, and it was like it burned his fingers or something. He threw it back in my window. And that really made me mad because I had my head turned, right, when he did that. And when I turned back around and I saw it there, I said, "Did you throw that?" And he got, kind of meek. Well, no, I dropped it. So anyway, we have these encounters, and we do our best to enlighten them too, being careful, of course, not to influence a public official or whatever that is that they charged our Colorado people with, influencing a public official or something along that line. So, stay within the boundaries and learn to exercise those rights and carry the appropriate documentation. I'm going to turn my plates in and my license in and get the cancellation notice. And I already have a binder that I carry with me with my notice of affidavit of suffrage and copies of my authenticated birth certificate and numerous other things, including the one that shows them how much we charge for being detained after 4 minutes. And that's based on law. So, case law. So, anybody else have any questions out there?
So that you know, Colorado does have the in this state definition, and it's in Title 39 on taxation, specifically gasoline taxes. So it comes up under CRS 3927-101-15, and it's almost identical to ours. In the state means within the exterior limits of the state of Colorado, and includes all territories within these limits owned by or ceded to the United States of America. So it's almost identical.
Nice, thank you. I'm going to need that.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Captain Kev here again. Jackie, are you currently driving with no license plate?
Is that a loaded question? I travel. Yes. I travel with. I float. Actually, I've been told I float. Yes, I have one car. The main car that we use has no plate. I have another one that I talked about earlier that was in my estate that now has my own plate, and I got that in 2012. So that's had my own plate on it since 2012. It's been out of action for about a year, the last year, maybe less. And then we have another one with out-of-state plates, and it's in a state where residency is not a requirement for plates, but it's not owned by us. It's owned by an association. So, yeah, we have a mix. We have a mix of the way that they're done. So, 2 completely not registered, 1 in another state.
Okay, nice. Well, I'm, getting things prepared so that I can. I'm going to go ahead and set up a trust myself and put those in a trust. So
do a little research on the trust element. Here's the problem with titling property into a trust. The trust requires you to have the trustee's name. If that happens to be your name, then it could be, it's a kind of a long arm stretch, and it's really not correct. It doesn't mean it's your property, but, your name's right next to it, so that can be an issue. Associations, you're not required to, have anybody else hold it in their name. Associations can hold property in their own name. So that's why we choose associations mostly.
Nice. Okay. Well, the main thing is I heard you. I think it was on the last call where you said that there was a kind of a linchpin thing there where you were out of the system, but the vehicle wasn't.
Yeah, you can have that situation, or vice versa, and there's other things that can kind of tie you into it as such. But if one kind of requires the other. If you're licensed and you're in an unregistered car, they'll tow it, definitely. My situation was a little difficult. I had been out of the system. I wrote to the DMV, and they removed me and my car from the system, and then I had a problem with an officer who put me back in the system number of years later. So that caused me a lot of problems. He had to look in the records and find information to add me back in, and that caused me problems. So that's why I got into all the issues I got into. But, yeah, you kind of have to watch that. If you have a car in your name and you're driving without a license, then that would be the nexus. So that's why if you don't have either no registration in your name and no license, we haven't had problems. It is kind of important that you do have evidence with you. That's, definitely important. Otherwise, you're like an enemy of every state. Kind of like what the guy from Georgia was saying. You're kind of wandering around without a flag. You become an enemy of every state. That kind of applies. It's important to kind of carry some sort of evidence with you. Although there's no law that requires you in California to carry identification unless you're a felon, it's still a good idea to have something so that, their presumptions don't kick in and they, probable causes and all this other stuff starts to hit.
Right.
Yeah, so, and we talked a little bit about IDs. A functional equivalent is technically all you need. You can Google functional equivalent and the Attorney General of California. There was a paper that was the Attorney General put out, and basically what they're saying is all you need is a functional equivalent. So many of us, that's what we carry. I used to have my own one, which was the best one I ever made. It just had my picture on it, my thumbprint, and the statement like, I give myself the right to drive, which was not the right statement, but back then, that was like back in 2005 when I first started doing this. I still had great success with it, and I showed it to an officer. I managed to, not incur any detention or takings of any kind, no ticket, nothing. He was told to let me go, and he didn't understand why. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah.
You've done a lot.
I've been doing it quite a while, so and we've managed to kind of work through it. But I do think it's important that when you go to other states that you do check that out. But, the right to self-determination is kind of, a very important point. I don't travel out of state that much, so I haven't incurred any problems. Well, there's just like Arizona and Nevada near me. I go into those occasionally and have not, had any problems with like no license plates or anything like that there either. So.
Right. Wow. That's great. Well, these things are encouraging because we're picking up tools to protect ourselves as we exercise our rights. And that's all we're doing, is exercising the rights that were always there and that we thought weren't. So, anybody else have any questions, comments? Well, we're at about a quarter after the hour, and so we've had a good call tonight, 2 hours and 15 minutes roughly. And Jackie, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing all this information. I think that there's been great information shared tonight by many. So thank all of you guys for sharing and bringing your wealth of knowledge to the table. We do learn a great deal in these calls. And we are paving a way for the future, for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. And so it's just the right thing to do. And if nobody else has any questions or anything else, we're going to do 3, 2, 1. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.